Okay, so shall we start? Okay, welcome you all in our online series, graduate program application series. My name is Bharat Rathod, and I'm the founder and coordinator of Bahujan Scholar this network. And the network of this network is of graduate students, faculty, and professionals from academia outside India, only outside India. The purpose of the network is to support each other and organize online events on academic and professional development topics and mentoring. Um, I'm also going to put the feedback survey link in the chat box. So please, at the end of or in the beginning, whenever possible, please take the survey so we can get feedback from you in terms of how to improve, what kind of events you would like to attend, and so on. And please mute your microphone. Okay. We have two fantastic panelists, Dr. Ankita Nikhalje and Purvesh Dongre. So first, let me introduce Dr. Ankita Nikhalje. So Dr. Nikhalje is an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee in counseling psychology. She graduated with her PhD in counseling psychology from Purdue University. She has psychology degree from Australia and UK. Dr. Nikhalje's research focuses on the impact of historical, systemic, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized oppression on lived experiences and mental health. She is particularly passionate about the issue of caste-based discrimination in the South Asia diaspora and uplifting the experiences of those who are minoritized within their communities and social identity groups. Dr. Nikhalje brings her experiences and knowledge as a mental health professional and researcher to address the need for critical theories and frameworks in defining decolonial and liberation psychology from South Asians. Our second panelist is Purvesh Dongre. Purvesh Dongre is currently working uh, as an intern at Informatica. Purvesh completed a bachelor degree from Pune University and master degree from IIT Delhi. Purvesh is finishing up his PhD in computer science at Virginia Tech. His research focuses on user modeling from improving human AI, artificial intelligence interaction. And Purvesh is passionate about using technology to improve human health and well-being. So both the panelists, you will have 15 minutes each, to present your idea, thoughts, presentation in whatever form you want to present. And feel free, whoever wants to go first. This is open. And after the first session from each panelist, we will have a question answer session. So for all the participants, you can print or you can ask your question directly to panelists. So Purvesh or Ankita, now up to you.
Ankita, please take lead.
Bharat, will you give me screen sharing capabilities, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. Purvesh, I'm providing you too, in case. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Ankita, let me know.
So hi everyone, Ankita here. I will be talking about the reference letters and how to get a good, strong, positive reference letter to support your application. So I've put together just a couple of guidelines for it. So even though as a student, you are not the one writing that, you're asking someone to do it, there are things that you can do to make sure you're getting a strong reference letter. And I will just talk through that, and you can ask me questions as well as we go along. Okay. So firstly, and some of the things that I've taken into consideration while writing this is Some of the things that I've learned from my colleagues as well and myself personally in receiving reference letters from students coming from India generally is that the reference letters sometimes are not meeting what the expectations of in this context I'll be talking about US universities are. um, there is a lot of value placed here on the reference letters and how it's written and how strongly you're endorsed. And a lot of the letters coming out of India tend to be a bit generic or quite short or are not meeting some of these like things that the campuses or universities here are wanting to see. So understanding that the reference letter is not just a formality, but that it does carry a good bit of weight as part of your application. So the purpose of a reference letter is that it's a written endorsement that you can be successful in graduate school, right? So this is another person saying, hey, I know this person and they will be successful. And it is coming from a trusted and valuable source. So it's not your friends or your neighbors or family members who are writing you the letter. It is another professor, employer, someone who you've worked closely with, and someone who has had any kind of like supervisory relationship with you. Um, and that counts for a lot in terms of their endorsement. So choosing a letter writer, so this is an important part. So you want to make sure you find someone who can write a very strong and positive reference letter. Just because someone agreed ki ha, I will write you a reference letter does not mean that it'll be a strong one or a positive one. And I've heard some very like horror stories in terms of members of our community being completely uh, uh, treated poorly when it comes to reference letters, when someone agrees and doesn't write a strong one or agrees and then doesn't write one. So please get a direct commitment that they will write you a strong letter. Identify someone who you've worked closely with. And even if it's for a short period of time, if there are specific examples or specific things that they can speak to you, your qualifications, your qualities, that is a good person to choose to write a reference letter. One of the other mistakes I see people doing it is like asking pretty late in the game, like, oh, this is due very shortly. Can you write it? That makes it very hard. So ask as early as possible. At minimum, give it a month, if not longer, to your letter writer to be able to write you good letter. Another important consideration is that please ask that they write a letter that is at least one page long is a good length and single spaced. So single spaced one page is what your expectations are. Um, Now a lot of times we think that okay, I've just asked this person to write me a letter and that is enough. There are things that you can do, and this is something that I learned pretty late as well, but I've learned this from my mentors now, in that you can tell your letter writers um, what you want them to include and giving them the information to be able to write you a very strong letter or a positive letter. So give them the information about what programs and institutions you're applying to, the deadlines for each of them, and how they should submit the letter. So they have all this information in one place. Another part is like mention any specific cultural contexts that are relevant for the programs, right? So I'll speak just for the North American context because this is the one that I'm most familiar with at the moment, is that they are not looking for a balanced reference letter where like here are the positive and here are the areas of growth. They are looking for just positive and more positive. It's a very uncomfortable, at least initially for me, a way of writing where it's very like, you know, how you stand out as a person, how you are exemplary, how you are special. So any flaws that are mentioned in the letter might be seen in a very negative light, even though that's not the case compared to, say, the British context that's looking for a more balanced, saying here are the positives, here are areas of growth, and I give my strong endorsement. So please like look up the different context and areas that you're applying to. And if it's the North American context, please make sure to tell your writers that it just needs to be positive and more positive. Very because culturally that is what looks good. Um, also explain to your letter writers an explanation of why you're applying, your motivation, what excites you, and your career goals. So this is something that they can include in the letter as part of their description of you, right? Like, okay, she's applying to this because she really wants to be a psychologist, an academic, and she's extremely motivated because blah, 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 blah. So all of this is stuff that you can give them and have them include in your letter for you. So, and if possible, even if you are meeting with them and having this chat face to face, if you can write it and give it to them, it's even better because then now they have that reference material to include in the letter. Highlight. So this is something that to me felt like was missing in some of the letters I've read from India is like very specific examples of your work. So this could be anywhere from like any research project, assignments, or tasks that you have done that helps you stand out, right? So if I'm writing a letter for my students, so even though there is a group assignment, there is an assignment that all the students do, but I will highlight the specific student's assignment, right? So I will say, for example, oh, Ankita did her presentation on social class in the US in my multicultural counseling class. And this stood out because blah, 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 blah. Right. So being very specific and giving very specific examples. So it's hard for on the professor side to remember that you did XYZ work. So make sure you actually like remember what class, in this case, if you're asking a professor, and write down the projects and exactly what tasks and stuff that you did. The other thing you can do is also share your resume or CV to help them remind you of any qualifications or projects you worked on. So in the past, things that have helped stand out is not writers who have just shared stuff from your CV, but writers who will just use stuff from your CV to further add evidence that you are an exemplary student and whatnot. And it's also for the writer to feel some confidence in your application. Hopefully they feel confidence irrespective, but this just kind of like support. So it's like you're making your case to your letter writer, giving them all the information to write you a strong and a positive letter.
ओने दे रबड़ एनाटॉमी निबंधी पहला बटन दो जे
Can whoever's unmuted, can you please mute yourself, please? We can hear you. Okay. Next, I've broken this down into some structure. The way I've written this handout is something that you can then share with a letter writer as well, so they can have this as a reference point. So even though you are not the one writing it, you can, if you understand what a good letter looks like, you can know what to ask for or be able to like ask someone else if you feel like this person's not writing you a good letter. So starting with the paragraph 1, why the letter is being written with an endorsement. So even just starting out the letter with, I am writing this letter in strong support of Purvesh's application for whatever PhD program in whatever institution, right? So that should be their first statement. So off the bat, like as a reader, I'm not searching for, does this person support them, not support them, how strong or not strong is their endorsement. The most important part is in the same paragraph is establishing the relationship. So often I'll see people will write, oh, I know Ankita from my social psychology class. To someone who doesn't know about a social psychology class in a particular institution, there is no context. So you want to say, I was Ankita's teacher. I know her from the social psychology class. This is a class is a required class as part of so-and-so degree. and it had 50 students in the class, and Ankita really stood out as the top 5% in the class, right? So even giving your grades or your rank without context is not meaningful. So making sure to provide that context, right? Because like the social psychology class could be 100 students, it could be 10 students, it could be a seminar style thing. So that is very, very important in understanding how this person knows you. Going into paragraph 2, specific projects, assignments, or tasks you worked on. So this is similar to my previous example, being very specific and like, this is what Ankita did in her work in my class, and then really talking about what skills you showed and why this really stood out from other students. So as you can tell, the goal is to always compare you to your peers, right? And even though this is like very uncomfortable, you kind of just have to like amp this up for an American audience, something that is very uncomfortable sometimes. It's like a side note. I remember writing my research, not research, the statement of purpose or whatever, for like why I wanted to come to my PhD program. And I had a friend who was been in an American institution read it so she could like amp it up to like for an American audience, because we're not used to culturally also writing about ourselves in this like, yeah, I'm the best, I'm so unique way, which is what Americans are looking for. um so projects, specific things that you did, and paragraph 3, personal anecdotes, right? So again, we tend to shy away from this, but personal anecdotes work really, really well in reference letters. So having your letter writers like add that and ask them to add it. If there's any specific interaction you had, maybe you helped a student in class, maybe you did something that really showed your characteristics as a good person. We're all good people, but again, America. Including those anecdotes in the letter. um and so now you have the context, the support, specific tasks that you did, why that stands out, and then like, you are a good person, you have really good skills, you are kind, what have you, that really adds to the overall application. And also thinking about, even though if it feels a little bit weird or uncomfortable, if you think of the whole graduate example application as a whole, this is the only place really where any sort of like personal characteristics are being highlighted, so it is okay for them to write nice things about you. And then finally, paragraph 4, again, ending with a strong and clear recommendation, right? So I have no hesitations in offering my highest recommendation, strongest support. So you have that endorsement at the top and you want that endorsement at the bottom, and then just like a very generic, please contact me if you have any like questions, etc., etc. And that should make a good, strong reference letter. It gives context, it gives specific examples, it compares you to your peers, and it talks about you as a person. From an academic, from my standpoint, what we are looking for is, hey, can this student be successful? Like, what are other academics, what are their employers seeing about them, and can they vouch for them, right? So it's not like it's not just a formality. We really do read I really do read these letters. I read like who's writing this letter and why they're writing this letter, and just the enthusiasm with which they're writing this letter, right? Like that plays a big role in it. Sometimes you'll see letters that are really short that say, yeah, to whomsoever it may concern, this student will do great. And it's like, but you are not proving to me why. The to whomsoever it may concern is a very common thing to write, but it's like, No, I need more specifics. Like you want to be specific, which is why give your writers all this information and ask them to include very specifically like what they are writing for you. Um, and the last thing I will say is that this reference here, this writing guidelines reference, this U Calgary, is one of the best letter writing resources I've seen. So I will highly recommend that you check this out. Let me just like I am going to probably use this myself for the letters I write because I found some really good information here. And though it's written for faculty members and other professionals who are writing the letter, it is good for you to know what's a good letter. And if your letter writers are open, saying, hey, this is what is expected as a reference letter, right? Particularly, I will just show you they offer like examples, right? Even small stuff like writing fundamentals of like the student generally performs well, but the student performs well as like different like action words, what makes a week better, best thing. So I would encourage you to be proactive with your reference letters. Don't just leave it up to your reference letter writer to write you a strong one. You make your best case for it. Say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Here are some examples of it, and here is what it's needed for. What is needed for each of them to give yourself the best shot in getting these letters. So cool. Okay, that's me.
Okay, great, Angita. I mean, you raised a fantastic point. This is one of the best actually I have seen. I mean, presentation on reference later and the references and so on. Thank you so much. So now next panelist is Purvesh Tongre. So Purvesh, please start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Bharat. Thank you, Ankita. It was definitely like one of the best presentations I have seen on, and it will definitely help me in making my recommendation letters. So I'm gonna steal that idea from you and steal those guidelines from you. But
Not
I
not
think,
stealing, not stealing. We are sharing. That's what we're all here for. This is not stealing. We're sharing. We're supporting each other.
yeah. I mean, wrong choice of words, but yes, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Um a couple of points I just want to add to the letter of recommendation category because I also went through the process of trying to get recommendation letters for my graduate school. And one of the things that I struggled with was to uh, get my recommenders submit their recommendation letters on time. Uh, and that becomes a very difficult situation for any graduate student to pester your recommender constantly to please submit the recommendation letter and especially like if you're applying to many institutes, because if you're applying for many institutes, 8 or 9 institutes, that is ideally what you should apply for. Uh, then it becomes a big task for them also to submit all of those letters individually for you, because they also have to take the time out and go to that link and submit all the material. And sometimes the submission process is not easy. It takes a lot of time, and so I think we should be mindful and respectful of our recommenders' time, and at the same time uh, try to keep following up with them so that they submit the recommendation letter on time. Uh, Another thing that I struggled with was when one of my recommenders decided to not recommend me anymore. So that can also happen. So just have a backup. Like if you need 3 letters of recommendation, then ask at least 5 people. In case that one of your recommenders decided to not give you a recommendation anymore, or they forget, or anything happens. I mean, anything can happen. So just try to keep that backup option with you so that you don't uh, get into a situation where you don't have enough recommendations and your application does not go through. So yeah, those two pointers on the letter of recommendation category, because this is something that I personally went through. So maybe you all can learn from that and take more care for your applications. Okay, moving on to the CV. Now, can you see my screen? Okay. So the CV is essentially a curriculum vitae. It's a Latin word for course of life, which highlights all your educational skills, your relevant works, your experiences. And when it comes to applying for graduate schools, the importance of CV can be multifold. It can in some graduate schools, not all, because when I applied to Virginia Tech, I wasn't asked for a CV to submit. But in some schools, they are required for you to submit your CV, so it will definitely help you in your graduate school applications. What the CV was more helpful in my case was applying for graduate assistantships and for reaching out to my research advisor. Because I was applying for a PhD program, the way I went with that process is I reached out to the professors prior to formally applying for the PhD program. And when I reached out to these professors, I sent my CV, my research CV, along with my email, my first email. So for me, that has worked. I mean, the use of CV was more in that regard than using it for my graduate school application. But like I said, you may need it for your graduate school applications also. But definitely, it's important when you're applying for graduate assistantships and when you're reaching out to your research advisor. And a CV is different from a resume, and you may already know this, but a CV is a longer format that highlights your skills, experiences, and education. Resume is typically like a shorter format with resume typically takes one page only. It's a one pager, so that someone can quickly go through your work experience and your education. But CV, it highlights more details about each and everything that you have done in your career, and so it can typically be of 2-3 pages. Like if you're applying for graduate school and if you don't have a lot of experience, if you're just a student with maybe a couple of years of experience, it can be 2-3 pages, not more than that. But typically, CVs don't have a page limit, and people who have had a lot of experience may have CVs that page up to like 10 or 12 or 15 or 20. I've seen I think the longest CV that I've seen is maybe it was around 35 pages with all the accomplishments that they wanted to mention. I'm like, I was totally shocked by it. But I mean, there are people who have those kinds of CVs on their websites. And these are the people who have had a lot of experience and who have been in the industry for a good amount of time. So, but I think for a graduate school application, a CV that is 2 to 3 pages is sufficient. Shouldn't be more than that. When it comes to the components of a CV, you should typically have a header, and the header would specify your name, your contact information, like your address or email ID, and it can also have some of the related links. So it can have your LinkedIn profile link, it can have your Google Scholar or similar, like if you're not on Google Scholar, if you have some other research portfolio or a research website or your own website, then you can add a link to that. You can add a link if you're applying for CS PhD program. You can add a GitHub link. So these things are important because again, they showcase your work, your research work specifically. So you can have these in the header itself as links. Then the sections. Now, for an academic CV or for a graduate school CV, I think the most important thing is that when you're applying for a certain, and this is maybe a generic uh, explanation of how you should go about a CV or a resume. Now, because your objective is to apply for a graduate school program, you should highlight or you should emphasize on the things that are most required for a graduate school. So, what is most required for graduate school? If you're applying for a PhD program, then if you have a master's degree, then you get that is a good thing because, especially if you've had a research-based master's where you've done some research, if you put that on the top of your CV, then it gives the more emphasis, it gives the more uh, importance when someone is reading your CV that okay, this person has done a master's degree and they have some, and especially if you've done a master's degree from a good institute, then it creates a bigger impression. So highlighting your education, and especially if you have a master's degree, then highlighting that master's degree, where you did it from, your institution, your graduation date, and if you did a thesis for your master's degree, then you can also add a title of your thesis to your master's degree section. And then you can have your undergrad. And I think with the undergrad, you can end the education section there. You don't have to go until your schooling because I'm not sure if that is very well looked at. I mean, it's not important when it comes to graduate school application. Uh, More important because if you're doing a PhD, then more important is that have you done your undergrad and your master's in the same area, and if you did some research in that area. In schooling, you are not focusing on a certain area, so it's not that important for them to know. So you can avoid that. But master's degree, yes. Undergrad degree, yes. And if you did any kind of a research thesis, or if you can, even in the undergrad, if your institute required you to do a thesis, then please add that to the education section. Then the second most important thing when it comes to applying for a graduate school program is if you have any kind of research or teaching experience. Now you may have other work experience, but I think that becomes less important when you're applying to a master's degree or a PhD program. What becomes more important is your research and teaching experience. And in this, you have to add the position title. It goes similar to what your other work experiences would go. You have to add your position title. You have to add the company or the institution that you work for. You have to add the dates for which you worked on for that position, and then a short description, maybe a couple of lines of that description on what you are working at. And in some cases, it also becomes useful if you're working with someone who has a big name in that area. So, for example, if I was working with someone who's an expert in and well known within human computer interaction, then I would also add their name in the description that I was working with Professor XYZ, and this professor is a well known in HCI. I don't have to say that, but because I just write his name, people will automatically know that okay, this he has worked with a big professor in a big class, and that description will help me with my application. So, so research and teaching experience is something that you should focus on when you're writing your academic CV. And then, if you want to, if you have some professional work experience, you can add that also. But I think the focus and the emphasis, because you're applying for a graduate school, it should be on the research and teaching experience because that is what you will do with your graduate degree once you get admitted. So the focus should be on that. Then the third thing you should focus on adding is if you have any publications. And this becomes crucial when you're applying for, again, a PhD program or a research program, because when you're doing that research program, the skills that they expect or the kind of output that they expect from you at the end of that degree is some kind of a research publication. And if you have any research publications and if you can add that to your CV, then it will definitely help your application and it will definitely help you stand out. And this can be in any standardized format. It can be in the APA format or MLA format or any other format that you follow in your area. But the format should be consistent. So, for example, if you have 3 publications, then all 3 publications should be in the APA format or whatever format you are following. It shouldn't be like the first one is in APA, the second one is in MLA, and the third one is in something else. So be consistent with the format that you're using. Then if you have any presentations that you did in a conference, You can add that because going to conferences, attending conferences, talking to people, presenting your work in front of a crowd, a research crowd is again something that you do with your research daily. And a lot of researchers do with their research daily. So if you have presented something, then please add that presentation. And you can add the title of the conference. You can add the title of your presentation. You can add the title of the conference. You can add the date when you presented this paper or this work, and the location of the conference. And an important thing with these presentations is that they should be separate from the publications, the peer-reviewed publications, because peer-reviewed publications sometimes also include conference publications. And you also present those in person, but you don't have to add that to the presentation skills because these presentations typically include the work that you have not included in the publication section. So if you have something that you presented in a conference, but it was not peer reviewed, then you should add that in the presentation section. But you should not repeat the information that you've already given to them. Then comes awards and honors. So if you have gotten any award, it can be that is related to research. Again, it should not be something that is not related to research and teaching. It can be if you don't have any other awards, but again, the emphasis should be that you highlight the achievements and the experiences that are focused on research and teaching. So if you have any kind of a research award or a teaching awards, for example, best teaching assistant award or best graduate student award, something like that, that again highlights your CV on why it should get admitted to graduate school, then that is something you should add here. And you can write the name of the award, again, Best Teaching Assistant Award for the CS department, Spring 24, and then a small description of that award, especially if the award is something that is not well known within the community. So, for example, with the Best Teaching Assistant Award, you can add a description like there were so many teaching assistants in this category, and within these many nominations, I was selected. And so, yeah, some kind of a discussion on what the award is, and especially if the award is not very well known, then you should add a short description of that award. Then lastly comes the skills and the references. Now again with the skills, you have to focus more on the research skills. So if you have skills on systematically reviewing the literature, if you have skills with data analysis, because these are the skills that you would be using as a researcher. You may know a lot of softwares, you may know a lot of languages, you may have a ton of lot of other skills, but these will not be as important as these two research skills because again, as a researcher, the most important job that you do is read a lot of papers, collect a lot of data, and do a lot of data analysis. So if you can highlight those research skills in your CV when you're applying for a graduate school, then that will definitely help your application and that will definitely help your CV to stand up. And then maybe you can add your technical skills, the software and the languages you know. With the advancement of AI and the ChatGPT and everything, the technical skill is not that as important as it used to be. So now with again the ChatGPT, everyone can code, everyone can learn any new language and make softwares and applications. It's very easy. So it's technical skill in a graduate school application, especially in the PhD application, becomes less important. But if you can read, if you have expertise in collecting data, if you have expertise in analyzing data, then that is something that ChatGPT still cannot do. And if you have those skills, then yeah, it will definitely help your CV to stand out. And lastly, references. If you have, and these references are typically the people who are recommending you, the people who you would ask for your recommendation letters. So you can add their names, their positions, what institutions are they serving at, and their email ID and the contact information. And that typically is the key components. Those typically are the key components of the CV. And as a sample CV, I would show you my CV when I was applying for graduate school. And let me pull that. Okay. So again, this is not the best CV out there, but I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was applying to grad school, and with the limited information I had, I created this CV and I sent it out to a lot of professors when I was reaching out for my PhD applications. So like I said, in the header, I have my name, I have my address, and this is, when I think about it, this is not that important. I mean, it's important that I tell them my location, that I'm from India and maybe this city, but I think the first line is not that important. I don't have to actually give them my address. And then my email address and my LinkedIn profile and phone number is, again, I when I look back at it, I don't think the phone number is that important because no one will call you on your phone on your cell. So maybe this is not that important, but providing your email address and your LinkedIn link and other links, like I said, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, or GitHub, then those are more important than providing your phone number. And then I talk about my education, and in my education, I highlight my institute, my degree, my specialization. I highlight some of my coursework. Again, when I look back at it, instead of highlighting my coursework, if I talked about, give a brief description of my thesis, then maybe that would have helped my CV more. But for some reason at that time, I decided to highlight my coursework. But yeah, maybe if you don't have anything to add to the description of your master's program, then you can add the coursework. But if you have a master's thesis, then add a description about that master's thesis. And then my undergrad education, specialization in civil engineering, and again relevant coursework. But I don't think relevant coursework is that important when you're applying for grad school. If you completed this, and if this degree is a fairly known degree, then the professor or the graduate school will know that, okay, these are things that you probably would have studied in your undergrad. But if you have a very specialized program that you enrolled in and nobody knows about that program, then maybe it's a good idea to highlight these coursework. But if not, it's a very generic program, then you don't need to highlight the coursework. And at that time, I had 2 publications that I wanted to highlight, and so these are the publications. This was the peer-reviewed paper that was selected in a conference, and I made the mistake of repeating this in the presentations also because this is the same paper. And this is what I was saying in my presentation, that if you have something in your publications, then probably you don't have to include them in the presentations also, because this already means that you have this work published and presented in a certain way. So you don't need to repeat in your presentations. But other works that are not peer reviewed, that don't include in your publications, you can present these or you can highlight these works in your presentation section. And after this research experience, I talked about my work experience. Now, this work experience, I made it a generic category. I included my professional and research experiences in the same section. But looking back at it, I think I would have done better if I had this as my research and teaching experience, and then another section for my professional experiences. So in those experiences, I include these. So these are my professional experiences, but this is my research and teaching assistant experience, and then this is again my research and teaching assistant. So I should have put these 2 first as in a separate section called research and teaching experience, and then these are experiences in the professional experience category. I think that would have been a better approach. I also highlight my standardized scores. Sometimes this becomes important, especially if you're an international student and if you're applying for a graduate school program through a professor. It sometimes is important that you highlight these scores also. After that, I talked about my certifications. Again, not that important when it comes to graduate school. but I thought maybe this can help me, but it did not help me. No one asked me about my certifications after, or even before when I was interviewed with professors and after sending them my CV. Nobody asked me about these certifications. Uh, lastly, the skills, and I mostly talk about my computer skills. I did not talk about my research skills, which kind of is important. And this is again a mistake that I made. I should have highlighted my research skills because I did do a thesis at IIT Delhi, and I should have highlighted the skills that I used in completing that thesis, which I did not, and that was a mistake. So, highlighting my research experience and then the other experience with data analysis experience, project management experiences, and languages. And lastly, my references, my three references who I uh, reached out to for my letter of recommendation. I give their name, their title, their institute, and their contact information. And yeah, this is my CV, which is in no way perfect, but it gives you a brief, a short example of how you can go about your CV and what mistakes to not do in your CV, which I did when I was applying. So with that, I'll end my presentation, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Purvesh. This is really very important points you mentioned and you showed your actual CV, so people can get idea actually how actual CV look like. So now our session is open for the question answer. So all the participants, either you can raise your voice and directly you can ask question, or you can print your questions in the chat box and we will read as we receive it.
I'll add one more thing
Please.
to Purvesh's thing is to keep it as like simple and boring looking as possible. I think the like actual CV, it's literally just like as simple and as standardized as you can make it, makes it like easier to read. Um, and especially for like academic programs, like I think of my sister and she makes like her CV look so like pretty and colorful and cute, and I'm like completely different fields and worlds. So just know that for an academic CV, just to keep it as simple and plain and boring and standardized as possible. The other things I would add is just looking up some of the schools you're applying to. They will have their own sort of career center and stuff that'll give samples of CV. So I would use that as a format. And then one of the things that I still use when I update my CV is looking up like action words for CVs. So when you're doing some of your descriptions, you can like add like analyzed or whatever like language that you need for your CV that are action words of things that you did. That I find that to be really helpful, especially in the stuff that you were saying, Purvesh, in terms of like describing some of the things you've done.
Yeah, thank you, Ankita, for raising that point. That's very, very important. Yeah. Okay. So there is a one question in the chat box. Is it okay to have small logos of the universities that I have attended on the sites of the name listed? Anyone?
I actually had those in one of my CVs, logos of my universities, but I I don't think it's necessary. I mean, again, if you want to make it like Ankita said, if you want to make it cute and fancy, you can add those, but it's not recommended. It's like Ankita said, try to keep it as simple and as boring as possible, but try to be consistent with the format. That is the only thing that is needed. Uh, but yeah, not necessary.
And if it is logo, probably is okay. Logos is plural. So that is probably more funky to me. But yeah, everyone has a different kind of ideas. Okay. There is another question, comment from you, Umesh. Thank you so much for organizing this wonderful session. It was very helpful. Either Ankita ma'am's highlighting LORs should be university specific, and how should be the structure, or Purvesh sir explaining the format and the areas should be added to the CV. Okay, this is just a compliment. Thank you, Miss. We appreciate it. Okay. Though, I mean, if there is no question, then I have a question and some comment because I, as assistant director of DEI, we receive a lot of like applications and recommendation letters. So, yeah, I have some my own comment and whatever you both raised that are, I mean, aligned with that.
I have a question like
Please.
Bharat. So what kind of reference is best suited in CVs? Is it academics reference or where you earlier worked with different organizations? So what the best suited reference in a CV?
Well, again, when it comes to applying at graduate schools and PhD programs, the recommendations that would work best is academic recommendations. So if you work with a professor and if you did research with them, then having those names on the CV would help you the most. But like I saw in my case, I did not have a lot of academic. At that time, I did not have a lot of academic recommendations. So I also included uh, some professional recommendations because I know that these people who I have worked with professionally will give me a better recommendation than the other professors that I work with. So it eventually, like the preference is academic, but if you don't have those professors, or if you have those professors but you don't trust them on giving you a good recommendation letter, then maybe you could go with professional recommendations that you know will give you good recommendations. Because eventually, what you need is a good recommendation, and if it can come from an academic, then that's the best thing. And the second best thing is a professional giving a good recommendation. But good recommendation is the focus.
Yeah, that's good.
The other thing I will add is also not that all three needs to be academic also. So if it's like three, if you do two academic, one professional, that's fine. uh for my program, because I'm in psychology and in the degree we do both research and clinical work and teaching. So one of my references was like I worked at, before I came for my PhD, I was volunteering at like a crisis helpline in Bombay. So the director there, Manohar sir, I asked him to write me a reference letter, so he could speak to like my clinical skills and stuff like that. So in like my psychology wala context, that worked really well, because that they wanted to see some like, oh, has she worked with, I don't know, humans before. So taking that into consideration as well. So if you worked somewhere closely related to your field, like that's good, like definitely use that, like balance it out. So yeah. And I'm also going back to your question, Ajit. I'm assuming when you ask like references on your CV, I'm assuming those are the same people you are asking to write and submit those letters as well, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
So prefer academic, but professional can be good in highlighting other skills as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Ankita, for raising this point. And Sachin, I'm coming to you before I forget my point. So I would like to add what Ankita you said. Yes, in certain field, what Purvesh said, particularly in science, is like very focused in academics and professional experience and research. But in some discipline, like in sciences, right, or in humanities, there are some areas or there are some discipline where theory and praxis are deeply interconnected, right? So if you have what Ankita said, if you have done some kind of a work which is closely aligned with your academic interest or academic topics, but might be like in a real world situation, and if you get that kind of experience, which again, my point is aligning with your academic interest, that would probably, in some cases, would be a very interesting kind of combination about the theory and praxis. So that would help and elevate your application standard and quality. Over to Sachin. Sachin, go ahead if you want to ask question
Yeah,
or
yeah. Thank you, Bharat.
go
First of
ahead.
all, thank you, Ankita and Purvesh, for the session. I have a question about CV, Purvesh. So, sometime when we apply for job applications, it's a different CV. But academic things, we do lots of interdisciplinary work. Maybe like I have, given session on different things like education and development interlinkages for all, and also I talk about some issues regarding the marginalized communities. So how we can, put it in the CV, especially when we are applying for PhD and all that. And I just had a uh, research during my master in Azim Premji University. But since then, I haven't write anything. So, is it important to have more writing sample for PhD application, or maybe we can put whatever we done in the past?
Thank you for your question, Sachin. I think again going back to what Bharat and Ankita said, you have to align whatever work you did with the program that you're applying for. So if all the work that you did and you are talking about, if it aligns with that program, so for example, you said you worked with marginalized communities and you did some work in that area. And if you're applying for a program that is in social sciences focused on marginalized communities, then you can definitely tailor your CV to that application. But if it's a if it's a program that does not look at those requirements or it does not focuses on those requirements, then maybe it's not very helpful in highlighting those experiences. Uh, so eventually you have to decide, and sometimes that is why CVs are tailor made. So when I uh, decided to apply for job, I used a different CV or a different resume. And when I decided to apply for academic jobs or research jobs, I use a different CV and different resume. So you have to uh, tailor make your resume or your CV for the positions that you're applying for, and only focus on those. You can talk about, like with the CV, you can talk about all your experiences, but you should focus more on those experiences that align with that job or that application. And coming to your second point, wherein do you have to you did not do a lot of writing work after graduating from Azim Premji University, and do you need to do more writing work? I personally think that if you have a couple of publications from your master's work at Azim Premji, then maybe you don't. Maybe you can use those work as references to your application. But with me, I did not have any publications when I was doing my master's degree. And I went into a corporate job and I was doing that corporate job. And then I realized that I have to do a PhD. And as soon as I realized that I have to do a PhD, I switched my corporate job into a research and teaching job. And I got some research and teaching experience there and I did some writing. And then I applied for a PhD program. So it again depends on your profile. If you have sufficient reading and writing experience, then probably you don't need to get more of it. But if you think that your resume does not have that reading and writing experience and research and teaching experience, then maybe you should get that experience, build up your resume, and then apply for PhD programs.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Purvesh.
Yeah, thank you, Purvis. Yeah, there is a comment, and the comment is from my mentor and my PhD advisor, Professor Sangeeta Kamath. And this is a valuable comment, so that's why I'm reading it. Depends on field one is applying to study in. An applied field like counseling or social work or human rights, lab research, a workplace reference is very valued. But in applied fields too, academic references are a must. Please feel free to ask question or you can print your comment or question in the chat box.
Bharat, did you say you had questions too?
Not question, like comment. So
Okay.
what you pointed out. Okay, now let me take this liberty actually as a moderator, because there is no question or comment. Yeah, so I think if I remember correctly, Ankita, you pointed out that the reference letter should be like comprehensive and should include your academic as well as some personal sort of characteristics and so on. So as an assistant director, we go through some material for grants and application. Sometimes some faculties, this is I'm talking about advisee and advisor relation. So advisor, they write for their advisee, and so poor, like 4 5 lines, and like very mechanical, or you can say, I would say I would connect with the Purve's point, Chat GPT kind of content, right? So thank you. This suddenly popped up in my mind. So for all the aspiring, those who are using Chat GPT, great. That's a great tool. We should use it. But keep in mind that's still a machine generated response on your whatever prompt you are giving. You still need a human kind of a correction and human touches, and you have to reframe it. So this is for all the aspirant, use it, but again go through multiple revision and add information and so on. So that is the point, I wanted to raise that. I mean, some people, they just write very mechanical, very short, that probably better to not having references than that kind of poor reference which doesn't actually add any value. And it counts, right? It counts added. If not, so in some cases, I'm saying, if they receive one reference, on strong reference, that counts, I would say, better than the two poor references.
Yeah, on the faculty side of things, yeah, the strength of the references is definitely one of the rating criterias for the application, and 100%, like, say out of the three, like one is really strong, that'll count for a lot. Then like two very poorly written or mediocre or not strong endorsements of the thing, which is why, like, telling your writers, like, hey, at least write like one page and please write about these things. And sometimes this has happened with me before, where my reference writer said, you write the letter and give it to me. So if you're ever in that position, now you know exactly how to write your reference letter. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, all of my recommenders did that to me. Like, okay, you write something and send that to me, and then we'll revise and that is how it typically happens in, unfortunately, in Indian academia. All of my professors and my managers, they were like, "Oh, you write something. We don't want to go through the trouble of writing something for you. To write something and send it to us, and then we'll do some tweaks, and then we'll send it to the institute." Uh, so yeah, I mean, in that case, you are in a good position, and there is that trust. I mean, it also means that you have the trust with that person, and they trust you with your work and with your writing. So that is a good thing also. But yeah, just be prepared if you are asked to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would also like to add important point that in sometimes in application process they have all the details about the formatting and the kind of prompts, right? So if the prompts are there, details are there, please, I would say, go 5 times, 10 times, and follow that exactly, because sometimes they ask, let's suppose 2 page resume, right? And if you're writing less than two, then probably it doesn't look good. But if write more than two, period, that's completely kind of go against you. So please, if there are instructions about application process, go through it, and if necessary, you can ask to any friend or any person who has experience, or what's the meaning of that, how to do it, and so on and so forth. So that is very, very important. Last, yeah, comment one or two, or oh, okay. Anyway, I mean, there is no comment or question. If you would like to add anything, beyond whatever we discuss, personally, please feel free. Ankita, Purvesh, I'm talking to you.
Well, I can go back to the chat GPT topic.
Yeah, please. That's very important.
So I have been like my research is on human AI interaction, and one of the things that I do with my research is test how people are working with ChatGPT and similar AI chatbots and AI models, machine learning models. And I do see a lot of skepticism when it comes to ChatGPT and the use of these AI models in real world. ChatGPT is a big example of an AI model getting applied into a real world scenario and people are working with it. And I just say that it's when you're working with things like ChatGPT, you don't have to trust it completely. Like it's a tool that can help you do some of your tasks, but it will not do that task for you. It can help you. So you can collaborate with it to get that task done. And if you collaborate with it, then you can do that task with more efficiency. But if you are under the impression that ChatGPT will do the task for me and I don't have to do anything, then that will not work. That will heavily go against you. So try to work with these tools, try to collaborate with these tools. These tools are definitely there to help you and support you. Uh, don't be a skeptic and not use these tools at all. And don't be an optimist and be over reliant on these tools. Work with them, collaborate with them, verify the information that you're getting, and then produce an output.
Yeah, I think this is, very important suggestion you made. Yes, it's true. Ankita, anything? Last comment?
Yeah, to Purvish's point, yeah, collaborate with these tools, use it as another source of information alongside like your own research and your own work, but don't like rely on it like 100%. And I think on the faculty end as well, like they're now starting to provide us a lot of training in being able to detect, though not very well, but they're recognizing how much the use of AI tools in this like very uncritical way is showing up. So now they're providing faculty training and being able to like detect it as well. So it's like like just don't use that as a shortcut. Just use it in a way that is supportive to your work. And I wanted to really emphasize Purvesh's other point before about having multiple references and backup references um as well, and sort of being respectful of their time. It is a lot of work, right? Even 10 applications, that's like 10 things that you have to do, and you're probably not the only student asking for a reference, blah blah. So ask ahead of time, have backup references, or even like split up your references if you do have multiple, like hey, have half of them do this and half of them do that. So yeah, definitely with the backup references and being very respectful of people's time. Yeah, those are the two things.
Yeah. So yeah, and last comment from my side, plan ahead, plan way ahead actually, because sometimes you feel like you will done by this particular time, but I would say please plan ahead because probably you might have time, but your reference writer might have busy with multiple stuff. So give ample time to them. I would say more than at least couple of weeks. More than a 1 month, 2 month, that would be great actually. So they can also plan ahead and they can also, write nicely about you. And certainly about preparing application material. Sometimes it requires time. Sometimes you need to other pair of eyes, to go through the material, to do editing, formatting, revising language, and so on and so forth. So please plan well in advance so you can prepare a nice application and revise it. Again, revision is very, very, very important. Sometimes you feel, oh, okay, one or twice. No, I would say multiple times. This is my own experience. Multiple times, if you revise it, you can catch sometimes mistakes in different point of time because you have different frame of mind at different point of time, right? So these are a few comments, and now we are concluding this session, and thank you so much for Purvesh and Ankita and all the participants. We have put the feedback link again in the chat section. So please give us your feedback about this event and what kind of events you would like to attend in future. So thank you all the participants for attending, and Jai Bhim to all. Bye.
Bye, Jai Bhim.